Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome, everybody. We're delighted to be here today on this celebration of International Women's Day. Very exciting. So it's wonderful to see everybody here. My name is Patsy Shudo-Dorr, and I run my own company called Change for Social Good as a consultant and an executive coach on inclusion and ESG. But my background is all in talent, inclusion, and ESG in a variety of investment banks and other organizations as well. So I'm delighted to be here. I've done some work with the Chamber before, and it's always a pleasure to be here. So we've got a great panel joining us today, and what we're going to be talking about really is reflecting on our careers as women leaders, and particularly with our fabulous panelists who are all working in primarily male-dominated industries. So we know there's a lot of research out there that shows that there's been an increase in representation of women across industry in leadership positions. However, we still have a lot of work to do. Currently only 10% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are women, as you may know. So what we want to do today is really focus on learning about the career experiences, the journeys of our panelists who all come from very interesting backgrounds and experiences, talk a little bit about mentorship, sponsorship, how to succeed in your career, hear about their successes, and also learn as a group. And we'll also have a bit of a discussion around what are your organizations doing to support women in leadership and underrepresented groups as well. So that is our plan for our session today. I'm delighted to be moderating and to be amongst such a great audience and panel as well. So let's go ahead and get started by having you each introduce yourselves.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Tara Clinton, and I am the Global Wells and Exploration Procurement Manager for ExxonMobil.
Hi, everybody. I am Lisa Marie Zopp. I am the Senior Vice President of Ballpark Operations for the Washington Nationals.
Good afternoon, everyone. Asha Verghese. I'm the president of the Caterpillar Foundation, the nonprofit organization of Caterpillar, Inc.
Thank you very much. As you can see, we've got a variety of very different roles and different industries. But what's really interesting is as we've had conversations prior to today's session, and I know in the planning of today's session, we've seen there's a lot of similarities in terms of your experiences, right? Growing your careers and your success stories to get where you are today. Can each of you just share with the whole group a bit about your journey and what were some of the strategies and particular moments that were most meaningful to your success? And maybe we can start with you, Asha.
Sure. Thank you, Patsy.
Yeah.
And really excited to be here to talk about this specific topic on representation and inspiration, because I know my own personal leadership journey was very much fueled by having both of these elements in my life. So a bit of background of myself. Growing up, I straddled between two very different cultures, but yet very similar worlds. I was born in India, where I don't think you could have escaped to clearly see the consequence of poverty. And at the age of 12, my family immigrated to the United States, but not just to a thriving metropolis, but to a very small town of 400 people in rural Kentucky. So there itself, you could also see in a very developed country what the consequence of poverty and living in that would really look like. I say that because now in my current role, as I look back, one of the biggest reasons for why I was able to catapult myself out of that environment was because I had parents that really believed in the power of education. As an immigrant family, when we talked about our future dreams of careers, I basically got three options: to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And I'm sure many of you here with similar backgrounds can relate to that. And I picked that engineering route, knowing that coming to corporate America, it allows for a stable employment opportunity. And I will say now that I am in corporate America and doing corporate philanthropy, that was actually a defining moment in my life, because what it allowed me to do was, being part of corporate America, I always had that representation of mentorship and sponsorship. And without that, I don't think I would be where I am today. So now as the head of Caterpillar Foundation, I'm really proud of the fact that I can take some of those experiences, as well as the problem-solving skills of being an engineer, to really be able to build solutions where you're not just looking at what's the technical component, but the full ecosystem system, especially for underserved populations and for women and girls. So that to me is something that I take from where I came from to what we're able to do as a company in the communities.
Wonderful to hear that. Sorry, you can hear me, right? Okay, good. Wonderful to hear your story. Thank you for sharing that, and what an interesting journey and how you take that experience forward into your career. So thank you, Asha. And maybe, Tara, would you like to go?
Sure, absolutely. So as I kind of reflect and think back, for me, it's maybe not salient moments that I recognized at the time, but looking back, I can kind of see that journey. And in a lot of ways, it has been an evolution of what we would now think of as a work-life balance. I don't know that starting my career 20 plus years ago, straight out of engineering undergrad, I understood that concept or thought it was something I should worry about. But I would also say that I don't think by anyone's definition or standard, I had a very balanced work-life reality. I was very career-focused, took every opportunity I could, was willing to take risks, accepting going to hard-to-staff locations all around the world that others with more experience were not interested in. But those really propelled me in terms of experiences and opportunity and depth in a much shorter amount of time than I think many of my peers were able to experience, which I think put me on a path towards where I am today. You know, as time evolved and life evolved, you know, I met my husband, we had our daughter. The reality of work-life balance evolved too, because now it wasn't just what fulfilled me in that equation. I had other humans I needed to factor in terms of my time and where I put my priority. And I think that was a salient time and place as I was trying to figure out how can I be successful and still define myself as a very career-focused, oriented female, but yet I also wanted to be the partner and the mother to that life that I had built. And through very serious, in-depth conversations with my husband and with mentors and others, sort of realized that only I could define that, and I needed to figure out what that right space was. Thankfully got an opportunity to, again, take a risk, and as a family, we said yes to moving internationally to a developing country that was emerging in the oil space, became an oil-producing country while we were there. And you know, now that work-life balance equation, I can't afford to not be successful in both places. I have a growing organization I'm leading, and it's new, and I'm setting a culture for the next many decades. But I've also taken my family and moved them to this country away from support group and friends and family, and I can't let that not succeed as well. And so I think through that growth, you know, I really kind of found my own way to succeed in both, and to believe in my ability to succeed in both, and that it wasn't necessarily about uniformity of time. It was about being present in that moment and being willing to be all in, but prioritizing both, and that it didn't have to be an end-sum game. I could truly be both and be embraced and successful in both.
Amazing, amazing story. It's something that we all struggle with, right? The work-life balance or work-life integration, as you hear it's called more often now, or very often now, I should say. But it's really great to hear your story. And you've been with Caterpillar for many years.
I've been with ExxonMobil for 21.
ExxonMobil.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh my goodness.
All
I know
good.
exactly where she works, just so you all know. But you've been there for a long time.
I have.
So a lot of different chapters within the same organization, which is fantastic.
My entire professional career has been with ExxonMobil.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's interesting, too. I think you don't always realize those defining moments when they happen, right? And always you reflect on them, and then they become real and part of who you are. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And again, I do know where she works. I just want to clarify that.
All good.
Lisa Marie, can you tell us about your journey?
Sure. So I've been with the Nationals for 11 years now, and my path to the seat I'm in now is not traditional because of my gender, but also because of my path. I came from an event planning background, so I joined the Nats and was helping with their event operations and felt like that was what I was going to be doing for a while. And then I realized there was a ceiling there, but I loved working for a professional sports team. So I look back at my career journey and realized that I was able to grow in a leadership position because I was always willing to take on something that wasn't in my scope of expertise. The first department that I took over that was outside event operations was venue services, which is technology on how we run our building. I am not technologically savvy whatsoever, but I knew that I could lead, and I knew that I could lead that group. So I kind of embraced that and said, okay, I'm not going to be able to sit in front of you and tell you how to use this technology better right away, but I know that I can advocate for you and advocate for what you need and be your leader. And so over the course of the last 11 years, my scope of responsibility has grown, and now I oversee the entire fan experience, from food service to facilities to the grounds crew. I am definitely not going to tell our head groundskeeper how to make that beautiful grass grow better, but what's kind of been my North Star is that I know that I can be a strong leader to the group even if I'm not someone who's an expert in their field.
That's wonderful. So I hear as a common theme a couple different things, one being that each of you have taken risks in the course of your career, right? Whether it's moving countries, moving locations, taking on new roles and responsibilities, and how important that is to really have that learning agility and those different experiences. So that's wonderful to hear. The other thing that I heard as a common theme is that each of you have had a lot of support along the way, and each of you mentioned at different points mentors. So I'd like to talk about that next. And I'd love to include the concept of mentors and sponsors, because I think we all know there's quite a significant difference between a mentor and a sponsor, where a mentor is a guide and a sponsor is more of an advocate. And sometimes they might be one and the same. But I'd love to hear each of your experiences in terms of those people in your lives and their characteristics that really impacted your careers, that were mentors and or sponsors. And maybe we can start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So absolutely huge advocate of mentoring, sponsorship. And I think, I've had several pivotal moments in time where that sounding board was able to help me navigate. Having folks who have been there before, who understand the dynamics of a corporate culture and the personalities that may be involved, but also who have gotten to know me over time, have truly been the most impactful and influential. I'll say that I am not necessarily the best networker. If I see somebody, I'm like, oh, I should get to know them. I can be a little awkward, and how's the weather, and nice shoes, and it's a little weird. And so I have been much more successful when I've been able to do that more organically and grassroots. I mean, I think it's important to understand, if you're going to ask somebody to invest in you and you're going to invest time in them, that there's something to be gained from that. And so understanding their roles and where they're at in an organization is important. But I also think it's important to remember, if you're looking at the folks who are at a stage of career that you want to get to in 10, 20 years, funny enough, they will retire someday. And if you don't have sort of that plenitude of relationships and network of mentors, that you can kind of find yourself a bit isolated unexpectedly. And so I think for me, it was about looking at, where do I want to go? Who's at different stages of that journey, but also a trusted peer network. Because I don't want to compete with my peers, and I don't want to compete with the young talent coming up. I want us to build up together and figure out who we can trust and support each other. And so as much as the mentorship and the sponsorship has been important, I think that broader network of knowing who I can trust and who has my back and vice versa has been significantly important.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, your peers as well. So a mentor or sponsor could be at any level, right?
Absolutely.
Any stage of their career, right?
Yep.
Great, thank you. How about Asha?
I'll say when I started my career, I'm a computer engineer by background, and I started in the manufacturing space, so you can imagine very male-dominated industries that I had to navigate. So I would say 100% if I didn't have the support of those mentors, sponsors, and allies. I don't think it would have helped kind of catapult my my leadership journey. But what I'll say is that when I started my career, as an immigrant, you're always trying to kind of say, I'm trying to fit in and not stand out. But it wasn't until I joined corporate America that I realized that you really need a support system that's going to really help you come out of your cultural biases, the norms, the social norms, and the stereotypes. I mean, we come with that whole package. So having somebody who is actually rooting for you is the biggest change that I've realized in a great mentorship relationship. And who's going to be talking about you when you're not in the room is what I realized from the sponsors and the allies that I have. And for those of you who are in the corporate space, there are employee resource groups that's available to you. So leveraging that to really be able to get comfortable and get out of your comfort zone as well. So that was absolutely essential in my journey. But then in now looking at, as we're looking at programs for STEM education or women's empowerment, what I realized is that no one told us this as we were growing up, that, hey, when you come into the workspace, these are the challenges that you're going to be faced with. I think the generation now is more connected to that, but I don't think when we were growing up, that was sort of part of it. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to instill as a foundation in our programs, to say, you really need to help build some of those networks so women and girls and just the workforce know what they're coming into as they enter that workforce. So the one thing I'd probably leave behind with this group, I'm sure many of you are mentors and sponsors and leaders in your workspace. What made the biggest difference for me was someone who was very intentional about who I am and what my potential could be. And that's the one thing I was reflecting as we were preparing for this also, is that I want to make sure I'm being that intentional with all of my mentees and the folks that I'm able to sponsor. So absolutely needed and necessary for a career growth.
That's such a powerful word. The word intentional, right? Just even thinking that through and absorbing that word and making sure that you include it in how you operate and work with others. That's wonderful. Thank you, Asha. And also for mentioning employee resource groups, which hopefully we'll have some more time to talk about in a moment as well. Lisa Marie, can you tell us?
Yeah, kind of echoing what they said. I think finding the person that you think needs that mentorship, also kind of awkward in the networking world, so over here. So when I was coming up within the Nationals, my supervisor at the time was always big about advocating for me when I wasn't in that room, always saying, okay, yes, like this is her background, but she can also do this, and here's why. And so now that I'm in the seat where I can be the mentor or the sponsor or whatever that person needs, I always try to look outside the bubble of how everyone sees them and take that personality trait as opposed to just that skill set and say, okay, I need to advocate for this person, man or woman, and say this person can help our organization in this way, and it's my job to make sure everyone else sees that.
I also like that you said man or woman. We are focusing on International Women's Day, but I think it's important to have those allies across both men and women as well. That's wonderful. It's great to hear. So what I'd like to do now is basically switch gears a bit and talk more about your organizations and what you're doing, the organization is doing specifically to support women, underrepresented groups, and your broader DEI strategy, if you will. And maybe we can start with you again, Tara.
Sure, no worries. Well, so I would say internally, we also have the employee research groups, which are executive-sponsored, providing networking, leadership talks, career development across just about every kind of demographic split, be that gender, race, religion, background, you name it, and just an opportunity for cohesion and building community, but also allyship. Externally, in 2005, we started our Women's Economic Opportunity Initiative, really recognizing that we are only successful when the communities and the countries in which we operate are prospering, and that women are such a huge driver in that space. And so, we need to figure out where are we going to put that investment. And so we started, commissioning some studies and doing some work to really help direct that funding in empirically proven ways. And the result of that was a roadmap for promotion of women's economic empowerment. And it helped us hone in on focusing on entrepreneurship, on promoting savings, utilization of technology that spurs economic growth, as well as supporting women in agriculture. And so those have been big focus areas. And since 2005, we've got about over $125 million that we've put into this space, reached women in over 100 different countries, and are one of the largest private sector donors in this space. And it's an important issue to us and something we definitely support.
And wonderful to hear the link between the communities as well, right? We need to have all of these partners working closely together to make a difference. It's great, thank you. Okay, so Asha, I'm going out of order here. We're kind of mixing it up.
So Caterpillar Foundation, we actually refined, we're a 70-plus year organization, but in 2020 we refined our strategy to really focus on community resilience. And one part of that is really around workforce of the 21st century. So we're a shared value philanthropy. Everything that we do, we try to bring the full DNA of the company into the community and in how we set up programs. So within the workforce pillar, we focus on both the skills gap of today and skills gap of tomorrow. And diversity and inclusion is a foundational lens through which we look at all of our programs in the community. So making sure that we are creating programs across 40-plus countries that's really not just looking at the skills that are needed in order for someone to thrive in the workforce, but the full ecosystem that's necessary. So specifically talking about women and girls, for example, a program we have in Mexico that's called She is Digital. What we quickly learned in that program, it's in partnership with Junior Achievement and Inter-American Development Bank. What we learned is that it's not just important for someone to get that digital skill set. It's also important for them to be able to provide a support network, to provide them with interview skills, to provide them also with mentors from tech companies that can actually mentor them while they're getting the skills. So if the name of the game is really economic mobility and employability, how do you really design programs to where you're really pushing that diverse talent force to be able to be employable, and hence the community can rise as a result of that. So that's the approach that we've been taking across Caterpillar communities to say, how do you really build up that very strong network of a talent pipeline that can go on about all in the current skills work, also but the future of work as well.
Wonderful. Also interesting if you think about, having been in talent for so many years now, even though I'm only 29, but the 30 years that I've been in talent, remember the days that those skills, interview skills, relationship skills were called soft skills, right? And it always bothered me that they were called soft skills. There's nothing soft about those skills. So it's really interesting, your approach, because you're focusing on the technical skills, but also the relationship skills, which
we're
are
calling
well
them power skills now.
What are you calling them?
Power skills.
Power skills.
Yeah.
Love it. I'm going to take that on if you don't mind. But it's really, and it's a powerful way of calling them that, because there's nothing soft about them. Right? You need all of those skills to be successful. So great, thank you. Lisa Marie?
My world's very different from their world. So some of you may have actually seen firsthand how we kind of embrace it. But internally, when I kind of look at what I've done over my career at the Nats, there's like a lot of things I'm excited about. World Series Parade, that's probably going to be my one seed for a while in terms of things I've accomplished. But launching our internal ERGs was a big undertaking. When I came back from having my eldest son, I was really lost. And so I created an unofficial ERG of all of the working moms at the time. And that waxed and waned. But when we officially launched our ERGs, a couple years ago, which were funded, which were something that we were using company time for, it was such a big step in growing the Nationals culture. And beyond the internal employees, we have a lot. We want to make sure our consumers are also are feeling that inclusion as well, whether that be our Ladies' Night or our Pride Night. We were the first MLB team to host a Pride Night. Ours is the largest. We have dozens and dozens of events that will make all of the communities in the DC area feel included. We want to play great baseball. We want people to have a great time at our ballpark. But most importantly, we want people to feel welcome. And so creating those types of events where people can come together in that support is something that's really important to our organization. And how we show that it's important is that we're creating them and inviting people to come.
That's amazing. And people feel welcome, they feel included, and therefore they're much more engaged, more than likely, right? That's great. Everybody on this panel has very cool jobs. I said that when we were talking earlier. I'm like, how fun, the baseball, I mean, all of these different industries. But so we know, for example, I'm sure most people in this room know, that having more women and diversity in leadership leads to higher engagement, higher productivity, and certainly profitability. And there's definitely a positive correlation with the bottom line. So I'm curious, when you think about your initiatives around DEI and women, et cetera, how do you measure? What are those KPIs that you have in place in your organizations to make sure that you're making the traction and the progress that you wish to? And maybe we can start with you, Asha.
I'll speak to the Caterpillar Foundation portfolio and how we think about it. So there's a saying at the foundation, we say, you can manage what you can't measure. So in everything we do, in all of our programs and creating that effectiveness, we absolutely have KPIs that are specific to each of the pillars, but also how it aggregates up to the overall impact that we're making in communities, because we publish that on an annual basis like every other corporation does. But what's interesting for us is looking beyond some of those individual programmatic KPIs to understand how we work in communities. How do we measure the partnerships that are being built, the ethos with which we're showing up and listening to communities, and the trust that's being built? And a lot of times those cannot be quantified, but being very cognizant and aware of knowing that as a funding entity, you want to ensure that the trust is built both ways. So how do you build measurements around effective investments that are being made that goes beyond the numbers? So that's another area that we're looking in. And to be very frank with you, Patsy, one of the things, I mean, we're in the space of making long-term impact in communities. It makes it very hard to be able to sometimes measure, are you truly making that systemic shift? So that's a journey, I will say, that we're all on, to be able to truly determine the success of our implementation. And that may even, surpass my time at the foundation. But I think with the introduction of AI and technology and digitization, we're definitely making a lot of progress. And I will give kudos to the Chamber Foundation platform that actually bringing folks together so we can all kind of look at the different pieces that we're contributing in communities and what's the bigger play here and how do we all come together. The last piece I'll say is on storytelling. And as an engineer, I'm very data focused, but one of the things that I learned in this journey is that when you're focused on communities, it's not just about the numbers, it is a balance of that human impact that you're making in communities. So how do you really balance that out to bring the human aspect of the impact that you're making in communities in addition to the KPIs is how we're looking at our overall portfolio.
Yeah, love it. Storytelling is so powerful.
Absolutely.
And I love what you said too. I mean, this is a long-term journey, right? This takes years to get diversity, equity, and inclusion right in any organization, certainly in society and our community. So it's a long-term commitment. There's no doubt about it. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so why don't, Lisa Marie, we'll go back to you.
Sure. For measuring the results of our efforts, some of it's ticket sales, like, right? So if some of it is pretty easy because we're consumer facing, so we can tell pretty easily if what we're offering is something that demographic is looking for. I think on the internal side, it's adoption of the participation in the ERGs. It's retention rate. It's seeing our leadership group how many people are getting promoted that are female? Is it because of our women's ERG that is helping create those mentoring relationships? So I think the externally internal are very different, because the internal can be more subjective, where externally it's pretty objective, that if people are attending our events and are attending those specialty events, we know that it's working and that there's a demand for it.
Oh, that's great. Absolutely. And it's also, I'm hearing the theme that it's important to be monitoring those KPIs both qualitatively and quantitatively, right? So there's the sentiment and the community and the connection that goes along with it as well. It's great.
People are always happy to give feedback on their experience at a public setting. And candidly, it's my job to listen to that. And some of that is watching. We have all sorts of ways to collect feedback from our fans, but hearing and truly listening. I feel like that's what we're all saying, is that we're listening to our employees, we're listening to whoever our end client is, just listening to what they need to feel included is a big part of what my responsibility is.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Thank you. Tara?
All right, well, there's